Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Behind the Profile, a feature dedicated to getting everybody to know the people on their LinkedIn feed just a little better, right? They're people just like you and I, and this man right in front of me is no different, except he's a lot different than some of the people that you'll find on LinkedIn. His name is Michal Bohanes. I happenstanced upon his profile, and this is through connections of mine, and that's the way the network works. So I wanted to say welcome and thank you, Michal, for joining us here.
Oh, Joey, the pleasure is all mine, and I'm supposed to give you my regards from my wife, who says she absolutely loves and enjoys your hashtags, as of course do I as well. But you're the king of hashtags in our family, and we really appreciate all your great support on my content.
Absolutely. Well, it's easy when it's great content to support. You make it easy to engage. But truth be told, there are way more important things in business than hashtags. And a lot of your content addresses the more important things, which we're going to get to here. We're also going to get to know the man behind the profile, because business is business. But I also know your husband, as you mentioned, your wife, you're a dad, you're a dad to a dog, or at least you had a dog a while back, taking a walk in the same forest as Beethoven. Is that correct?
Very good. Very well researched.
Yes, sir. I believe that may have been back when you had hair. I'm not sure if that video was back when you had a
that is
hair.
quite possible. Yeah, the hairs come off 1.5 years ago. So yeah, I've been doing content far longer than that.
Yeah, back then it was Content 360, which now routes to your current website, Alpha Lead Academy, and it's fantastic content. We're going to put all of the links to contact Michal up in the corner here, so you'll be able to engage through that QR code. But also, not to worry, you don't have to pull out your phone and get distracted. We'll put it in the comment section along with all the relevant links. But I really want to get to you as a man, and then we're going to integrate how that turned into who you've become, not only as a man at home, but also as a businessman, right? Because you're helping other people succeed. But it wasn't always your story, right? You were a 9-to-5er at some point, just like me. But I want to go into your background before you got into the 9-to-5 and then exited the 9-to-5. You don't come from a family of business people. You come from doctors, lawyers, and military men.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about their path that made you not want to take the same path?
Yeah, it was interesting because business, I'm such a latecomer to having my own business, because I just look at the young guys today who have been grown up with listening to Alex Hormozi, right? And I'm thinking, I'm sometimes a little bit jealous of that, because of course I didn't have that kind of access. And you have to imagine, in my home, I never ever experienced a discussion about you having your own business. This was as alien as thinking of that you could visit Mars one day, right? It was just completely alien. Of course you would go to university, that was important, of course, but you would have then become doctor, a lawyer, that kind of stuff, right? So the idea of having your own business was just completely alien. And even up to a point of and I was 26 at the time. Imagine, and by that time I had already done my law degree, and I was ready to start in a consulting firm, big blue chip consulting firm. And I met a guy who to this day I'm grateful for. Hi, Sean. And I met him in Costa Rica, where I was on holiday. And he had an iPod, which was also new at the time, and with a bunch of stuff with Tony Robbins on it, and many other people who were about investing in real estate and so on. Brian Tracy was on it, and so on. And to me, this whole world was just completely new. I was for the first time, I was listening to Tony Robbins about the idea of you can succeed on your own, having your own business. And that was such a revelation to me. Also, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, I was listening to that up and down. And so that was when I truly awakened to this idea of, hey, you could actually not be dependent on somebody else. But it was still such an alien concept that I couldn't fathom doing something like this myself. And I started and went into my job that I had secured at the time already. It was at Booz Allen. I was one of those management consultants who goes and flies somewhere on Monday morning and returns on Thursday. And that was my world for 2.5 years. Then I did my MBA, which horizons opened slightly, but still, MBA is still very much focused on the corporate world, which is why I then made the left turn and went to Google. All right, so I was working at Google for 3.5 years. And there, of course, you get exposed to startups much more. So I was slowly at a snail's pace approaching the idea of having your own startup, right? Of having your own business. And then I founded a startup, which, because I was so influenced by everybody else, you have to be in a VC-funded startup, which doesn't make any money in the beginning. And so I went into that and failed miserably and sunk about $150,000 of my own money. and the family's money as well. And then I was employed by a few more other startups. And then by that time, I had already tasted blood. So I knew ultimately I would do my own thing again. And after getting fired from the last startup for insubordination, I decided now is the time. I think I've had enough of bosses, and that was in 2016. So that's the story in a nutshell.
Man, I can relate to a lot of transition, right? I got laid off 3 times in 2 years, and some of it was the first one was in all the situations I had children. The first time I had one, and then the second time was when we were in the process of having the baby, not conception, but the 9 months after. And then the last one was baby's here, what do we do, right? And it can freak a man out, especially because as men, we want to be alpha. We want to take charge. We're forged by creation's design to take a leadership role. In today's society, as we talked about before, sometimes the corporate people that we sign up with don't necessarily embrace that same level of loyalty and honor that goes along with that. So, Michael, when you got fired, how did that shift your intellectual framing of what work could or should be?
Such an interesting question. I haven't thought about it in this way. So I really took it personally. I took that personally because I thought I was doing a really good job there. They just didn't get it. And part of the choice of what I would be doing at the time was out of spite. Because the specific reasons for me getting fired was because they just wanted us to sell in a completely new market. Just go out there and just hit the pavement and sell. And I was thinking, this just culturally, this product, it was a German product that they were translating to the UK. And I just thought culturally it just doesn't work. And it didn't work. It ended up not working even after I was fired. And so I was right. And I also was right in thinking that this needs community nurturing. It needs a content approach. They just didn't see that at all. They were just the Germans and you have to pound the pavement and knock on doors, so that kind of stuff. They were like super hardcore about that. And I was very much against that, which is why they fired me, as they should have. This is like not, we're simply unaligned and I'm lower on the totem pole. But how did it shift my perception of what work could be? I don't think it did at the time. I was just fed up with having worked under a series of what I perceived to be incompetent bosses. And I was just fed up with it. And I was thinking, I just don't want to be in that situation anymore. Even if I were to make less money, which of course, after you're in a couple of years in business, you realize how much more money you can make. And I'm making way more than I used to at any time before. But at the time you think, it's just going to get by, right? So it was, maybe to answer your question, I think it was the reframing consisted of thinking I'd rather work for much less, but actually like what I do and not having to work with people I might not like.
I mean, that's completely relatable. I know people that have been in similar situations where they love what they do, but you can't necessarily control the people that you work with or for, and sometimes you're just waiting for that break. But it still takes a ton of guts, right, to make a huge transition from, as we call in the States, a W-2, working for somebody else, to saying, you know what, I'm going for it. I'm putting all this knowledge and wisdom, I'm going to apply it, and I'm just going to do it. And it sounds great. It sounds like an awesome movie that everybody leaves the theater inspired and ready to do something, maybe pick up a workout habit or eat better, but not start a new business. Michael, no, maybe you took the end of that movie. You shouldn't take it to heart. That's not you. That's not us. That's not real. That's for the actors in Hollywood, right? Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of guts to make that switch. So how did you overcome maybe the reservations or maybe the resistance from external forces, but also internal inside yourself and within your own family?
I only got support from my family, to be fair, right? So that was, it was, my family always takes the stands, whatever makes you happy, we're going to support you. They even supported my first ill-fated venture that didn't make almost any money. And at least now I told them, of course, I don't want any more money from you. I already burned through the first one. But I just told them that this is now going to be a service business where I'm going to start making cash right from the start. And I think the right choice was also that I was going straight off something that I was good at, that I knew I had a skill in, which was writing, right? And so I just knew, very worst case, I can just write blog posts for companies, right? And that is effectively what I started doing. So And in terms of internal resistance, I think like thinking back is hard to get myself in that mind frame where I was in. I didn't have a clue about client acquisition at the time. I was basically purely going on the network. And I also thought this is actually good because now it's the time to sort of cash in on all the investments that I had made in my network prior to that. And that it would be a good time to just contact people that I knew and say, hey, this is what I do. And I'm on the market for, service business type work. Hire me. So I don't think that there was any like internal resistance. I just knew it was one of those really epiphany moments where you just know that your life has changed very much so, because you just know that you will make this work. And today I would say it's kind of like grow or die. I didn't have that word or that phrase back then, but I just knew, I distinctly remember the moment where I was sitting in London when I kind of came up with that and just said, yeah, that's it. I'm just not made for this type of work. And now finally I can make good on that promise that I had 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, 12 years prior, which was listening to Robert Kiyosaki and Tony Robbins and thinking, yeah, do your own thing. It's like, no, the time is here. Time has arrived.
Yeah, and a lot of people would say the time is always right, and a lot of other people would say the time is never right. You just have to do it and figure it out. And when it's a sink or swim mentality and you have mouths to feed and goals to accomplish, there's no plan B. There's no, all right, well, I'll just get another job, because you didn't want that. It wasn't bringing life into your life. Kind of felt trapped. And that's what you're trying to help deliver other people from, and you guarantee your results. I want to get to later why you've changed your mind on a money back guarantee, because it's very interesting, your insights on some of your content on YouTube. Again, we're going to put the link to Michael's content up in the corner. You can also catch it in the description, but it's definitely worth checking out. He's worth a sub on YouTube, as the kids would say. But one of the things that I love about your content is you're pretty original. Right. And I haven't always agreed with some of your stuff, but you've always challenged my ways of thinking and really in some ways have changed my mind on some things. Not completely because of you. Don't let that get to your head, more so your heart, Michael. But
I would love to know what were the things you disagreed with, if I may ask.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay. So in society, we hear the phrase that content is king. But in some of your content, you say that content represents more of a feminine nature. It's more of an inbound perspective, whereas outbound is more of male in nature. You're going for it. You're asking for the number. Mm-hmm. You're engaging with the goal of closing the deal, whatever that is. In life, could be getting the girl's number, asking for date number 1 or 2. But in business, it's, hey, let's have a call. Let's get that first 15-minute call. I want to get into the details of what goes on in that first 15-minute call. But I also want to get to kind of how you came to that hypothesis that better to be outbound than inbound.
I don't think it's necessarily better. Ultimately, in the long run, you do want to have a thriving content platform, right? And that should be ultimately the goal, because you don't want to be constantly chasing after people. But, and that is where I sort of disagree with the mainstream, at least the mainstream on LinkedIn, which is the mainstream on LinkedIn says you just effectively put out content and the right people will start coming to you if you're adding value in your content. And for someone who has been very successful in the past, this may be correct, right? If you have, led a multinational corporate, and then you start doing content and then you talk about your experiences, you will very likely get quite a big audience, because success is the biggest single predictor of whether content will be successful or not, right? It's like if you've run and exited a startup, for example, you automatically have an audience. If you write in the right way and you write about the right topics, you will automatically get a great audience. That's a given. But if you're starting out from relative obscurity, you doing content and thinking that this will feed you anytime soon it's a losing game. Unless you are exceptionally good looking and or talented, it's going to be really, really hard, to make this work.
I want to stop for a second and let you know that you just crushed the hearts of thousands of people, but in the best way possible, because that's what I needed to hear. Because here I am, I'm creating content. I'm thinking, if I can just get the right quote from the right person or get the right person to say this or the right feedback. The truth is what you've said before. Elon Musk can compose a tweet with a comma or an apostrophe, and it'll get 10,000 likes and retweets and everything else. But you could put out the most insightful, you put decades of thought into this system, and you'll get 2 likes and one of them's you, right? So how do you overcome this kind of barrier through outbound?
Exactly. And so that was the key thing. This is what our sort of the culture that we're surrounded by is trying to inculcate in you, is that content is the way. And it is in principle correct, because you do want to build a content brand in the long run. But between now, when you start doing that, and the point where content will be so lucrative for you that it alone can sustain you, even if you're just a one-person business, you have to count at least 1 to 2 years for that, and maybe even more, and just give it time and make sure you're doing it right. And outbound is the bridge between that. Right? If you don't do outbound in the first 1 or 2 years and believe that everything will come through content, you might get lucky, but why would you want to depend on luck? If you have a reasonably good offer and you just contact a certain number of people every day, every month, you will get business, right? It's virtually a law of nature. You would have to do something so fundamentally wrong. If you just did outbound in an honest way, you have a certain problem that some people want to fix, and you approach them, you will book calls. You will sell a fraction of those calls. And that's why outbound is just a connective tissue. And also it then gives you a possibility you will work with way more people. Therefore, your content will become more interesting as well. So it will feed your content. Therefore, I just think the fact that so many people are kind of, and I've changed my own mind on this, as I'm sure you researched this so well that I'm worried what you're going to come up with next, what you're going to hold in front of me that I said 7 years ago. But it is true. In the past, I have dissed the pitch slappers of the world. I don't do that anymore. I think it can be done well or badly. But simply adding someone and presenting them with your offer is perfectly legit, and it will not destroy your reputation, because people will instantly forget if it's not for them. But if it's combined with a long-term content strategy, outbound is the way to go if you're starting out at relatively zero.
Yeah, well, now I have to erase 15 of my questions, but I still have a good bit that I can ask you that you can answer. So you talked about all it takes is just being clear with your offer, being honest, being a person, being approachable. I think a lot of people have a hang-up about outbound for the simple reason that we're scared to death of being rejected. It challenges our tribal mentality, as you've said in content past. It's hard. It's hard to be told no, especially after the amount of time we spent crafting that perfect LinkedIn message. We've looked at the formulaic, the Socratic method, so to speak, on all the Googles. All 5 pages of Google searches reveal the perfect composition of the LinkedIn message or the cold email. And then we don't get the responses we want. What are some of the biggest things, the biggest hangups, the barriers, the obstacles that people come to you when on that first call you have with them? They're like, I can't sell, Michael. And you ask them, what are you doing? Or what aren't you doing? What are some of the fear words that come out that kind of hit you as they come out of your clients' mouths?
I don't want to be salesy. That's probably the main one, right? Because sales has simply a negative connotation. People just don't like it. And it is, interestingly enough, worse the older the person is, because they believe, rightly or wrongly, that they are an expert in their craft, which they are, of course. But the problem is that they have never grown the second leg that their business needs to stand on. And as you know, I work with service providers, and they're very often very competent at what they do, but that is just one leg of the business. If you don't know how to sell or market yourself, you are precariously balancing on one leg. And if the slightest macroeconomic wind comes, it's going to simply topple you over because you're standing on one leg. Because most of the people we work with are people who are dependent on referrals. They depend on word of mouth. They have long-term contracts, right? And so then if right now everybody's talking about a recession, I don't know if it's officially here or not, nobody kind of knows, but the issue is that many people have lost their long-term contracts. The word of mouth doesn't come in anymore, and many people are experiencing that now. If they have not built that second leg of the business, then they will easily get blown over. And it is facilitated, especially the older, more experienced they are, and also the more comfortable they are, it is very much facilitated by an unwillingness to put themselves out there and get rejected. Many of these people that we work with have never actually been rejected in their lives, except for maybe a couple of job offers that they didn't do. But in the last 20 years, where they just went from job to job, they haven't rarely experienced any like outright rejection. And that is really difficult to stomach. So this whole topic of, I don't want to be salesy, I don't want to be perceived as arrogant, that because I have to present myself that I know what I'm talking about. I actually had one client who literally said, in my content, I don't want to appear like somebody who knows what they're talking about. And I was like, really? You don't want to? And then we sort of corrected it, but that was like the first impulse. It was really interesting. And so that is the whole area that we need to reframe. And the best reframe for this, can I share what the best reframe for this is?
Yeah.
It's the idea is that you are so good at what you do, or at least you should have the aspiration to, but you're so good at what you do that it would be sort of almost a crime to not share this with the world. So every single cold email that I send comes from a place of conviction, because I know that the person who will work with me will dramatically improve their business, and that it would be a shame for everybody who I don't reach, who I could help. It would be a shame if I didn't help them.
And that's something you kind of brought up, right? Pushing a sale is hard, but helping somebody out is easy. And it's about that intellectual framework. It's about renewing our minds and not being programmed by kind of like a program that wants to keep us apart from each other, keep us in silos, and basically relegate relationships to DMs. But some of the most amazing conversations that you've had with your clients, which, by the way, you've served over 100 people, and those 100 people have reached over $500,000 a year. That's more money than I've ever made, I think, in my whole life, by the way. And that's okay, because I also haven't put in the work, right? And it takes work. And I think maybe another one of the fear things is like, how many of these do I have to do? How many of these do I have to do? So with that comes the question, 'tis better to automate or 'tis better to be a person?
Both have their justification. I think you simply should, and that applies even to like human interactions in sales calls. You need to be conversant in many different techniques so that you can deploy and develop the judgment on which technique to deploy in which moment. So there's a place for automation. There's also a place for manual, conversations. There is a place for being very forceful on a sales call, on kind of insisting, hey, no, really, this is the right thing for you to do, and I'm not going to let you off the call until you say yes to me, because I know that I can help you. And sometimes there is a way of being much more kind of like reserved, professional, and kind of say, yes, let's reconnect next week, for example, right? And so that comes from experience. So directly to your question, there are ways how you should automate stuff. For example, when you want to rapidly grow your connections, you would simply not have the time to add 100 people every week, and there's other higher priority items. And you have a clearly defined audience, let an automation tool run. I know this is going to be on LinkedIn, so I don't know if they're going to be. But let an automation tool run so that you add 100 people every week and get that out of the way, if you have many other things to do. That's a good example of when to do automation. When it comes to if you sell a very high ticket product, for example, or service, and you think that you can just automate your way into getting calls, then good luck with that, right? The higher ticket something gets, the less you should use automation. And all of that takes just time and some experience to develop the sensibility for when it's the right thing. But I would never say yes or no to automation.
Interesting. Again, if you're just joining us, we're with client acquisition specialist Michal Bohanes. Catch him out online. He's all over the place on LinkedIn, but the best place to learn about what he does is alphaleadacademy.com. Also, consume his content. It is like a steak dinner with a baked potato with the bacon and I'm sorry, it's lunchtime, so I'm getting a little hungry, but you get the picture. It's worth the juice is worth the squeeze, as the kids would say. It's awesome. Check him out on YouTube. We're talking about client acquisition and how he helps people basically gain freedom. And when I read that about saying you provide people with the ability to free themselves, free their minds, how has entrepreneurship freed you, other than the obvious answers? I don't work for anybody and I basically just work for my clients?
Well, that's a great question. I think it has freed me to be disciplined and to not succumb to automated patterns. It's really key. I think entrepreneurship is such a great exercise of stripping away dead wood. It's like a forest, right, that needs to kind of clear itself of dead wood, especially when you've been an employee for a long time. There's a lot of dead wood that you've accumulated, right? Like procrastination habits, the fact that you're not really very often being paid for performance, but just to be there and all that. That has accumulated a lot of dead wood on you. And it actually takes a lot of discipline and mental fortitude to forego those micro daily pleasures, like the daily checking of Twitter and just to quickly glance at YouTube to see if my favorite person has posted something and so on, right? And maybe even like longer, like bigger items. For me, this was like news and politics, right? I was really very much into it. You know, I had like some ambitions in this regard. And to have to pare that back and to really only focus on one thing, that you might say that this is actually restricting freedom. But I see this much more as, this could be any addiction that you may have, dear listener. But when you think about it, what are some like compulsions that you have, whether that's gambling, smoking, right, or whatever, overeating and so on, right? All of those are patterns that you do out of a certain type of avoidance, that you try to avoid doing the work. And because entrepreneurship forces you to face the pain, you become free because you learn to face the pain. You learn to forego the pleasure because you just know every single time that you indulge in whichever habit or little addiction that you have. As I said, for me, it was mainly about like politics and so on. And fortunately, I don't have that anymore, or in very low doses, and it's much more controlled now. It's purely consumption. But once you get rid of that, you become really free. There's this great saying from Jocko Willink, discipline equals freedom. And it's really true. And this is what entrepreneurship helps you to do.
This is good. I feel like I'm in church right now, Michael. I feel like I'm in Austrian church. By the way, he's not American. I know the accent fooled you, but he's over on the other side of that giant body of water. He's over in Vienna. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, but I have an American wife, so that qualifies me a little bit to speak to an American audience with some level of authority, hopefully.
Oh, of course. Well, not only that, but your street cred. That's what they say on LinkedIn.
Exactly.
It's second to none. When you get these people on these calls, how hard is it, and how did you overcome the temptation to provide the solution in 15 minutes? Because I know as a man, when somebody comes to me with a problem, right? It could be my kid. Hi, Daddy, I'm hungry. Well, the solution is you need to eat some lunch. So let me make you some lunch. My wife comes to me. This is happening. My first thought is, what's the solution to that? So I want to get to the heart of the matter. But in your game, in your business, 'tis better to wait, think, not make assumptions, and then address it when all of the facts are known. How long did it take you to learn that, and was it a painful lesson?
You mean in sales calls, for example, or with clients, with existing clients?
Either or both.
Okay. So first of all, it's a school of hard knocks, because you learn that if you make too many assumptions, that people are repelled by that. It's very key. Although I do believe that assumptions get too much of a bad rep, because after all, what is experience other than once you have somebody in front of you who fits a certain pattern, you make a few assumptions about them, and then they say, oh my God, it's like, me. That is assumptions, right? So it's like, I think assumptions get unnecessarily criticized too much. But it is true that as you're starting out, you should ideally, every sales call should start with a completely blank slate. Just listen to the person as they are. And you very quickly learn that, because by nature, I'm a very judgmental person initially. So I immediately form patterns, and my temptation is to instantly judge. Doesn't necessarily mean that I think it's a bad person on the other side, but that I'm thinking, oh, it's just like this other guy. And that's, of course, wrong. You should not be doing this. And so you learn because you didn't realize. I distinctly remember one sales call that I once had where the guy was actually telling me that he didn't absolutely appreciate my style of questioning him, and that I was being far too forceful and arrogant, I think he said. So I appreciated that feedback. It was unpleasant in the moment, and it just experience teaches you. And if you know that if you're going to be a little bit less assumptive and less presumptuous, you will close more, therefore you will make more money. There's no better school than entrepreneurship to teach you that lesson. So I that's why I warmly recommend it. It really strips away a lot of the negative ballast that you're carrying with you and makes you into a better person.
So if there were assumptions that you would say are totally off limits to make on the first call, what are those?
For example, the assumption when somebody is struggling with their business, to kind of to make any assumptions about why that is. Because it's also a very sensitive topic. Like when they are struggling with their business, you need to be extremely careful not to put any assumptions, any presumptions into it, because it's a very painful subject. It's like when somebody comes to a therapist and says that they're very unhappy. This is where you really have to listen very carefully and diagnose correctly what is the problem, and be very respectful with how you frame a potential solution to that problem, right? Especially in our world, the temptation is to assume that they, like I said before, that they are scared of selling. But very often it is not the case that they are scared of selling. They simply don't have something to sell. And that is keeping them from it. They also haven't heard about this lesson of it is not actually selling if you believe that you can truly help them with a problem that they have, right? And so then just thinking that they're lazy, they're procrastinating on selling just because they don't want to get rejected, that's a very dangerous assumption to make, right? Because it could have many, many underlying factors, and especially assuming laziness or comfortableness, right, is very, very dangerous. Broadly speaking, impugning motives for why they are not doing the thing that they know they should be doing, that is a very dangerous territory. Be very careful about that.
That's good insight, man. That's super good. I love the contrast and your ability to differentiate pain versus problem. You say pain deals with the emotional, while somebody's actual problem is logical. Why is this distinction so important? And can you provide an example in a B2B prospecting call context?
Yeah. Pain versus problem is important because pain is a much better hook into them booking a call with you. If you can correctly articulate their pain, then the conversation is much more likely to happen. Give you an example. The pain that many of our clients experience is the fact that they depend on referrals, as I said already. And that is a pain point because they are kind of there just sitting, twiddling their thumbs and knowing, hey, nothing's coming through. What am I going to do? And that is a pain that they experience. But when the underlying problem is that they don't have client acquisition systems in place. Now, what will be the better hook, for example, in a cold message? What will be the better hook? Number one, hey, are you also struggling with the fact that you're worried that what's going to be on the platter next month because you're depending on referrals? Or, hey, would you like to get some client acquisition systems built, right? The pain, including the pain-related language, like worry, anxiety, or feeling of failure, that is a much stronger hook to use for a cold email, for example, than an underlying problem. The problem, as you correctly said, is logical, it's more brain-based, and you need to distinguish that because, first of all, you need to understand, you need to get them on a call. And then once you have them on a call, you also go through the sequence. You first analyze their pain. Okay, tell me more about that lack of referrals. What happened in the past? Have you ever had this problem before? How does it make you feel? And then you just go through that, and then you go more into a diagnosing of, well, what are the underlying problems? They will tell you, for example, yeah, I tried cold email, but it didn't work. Okay, and then you go, okay, what did you do there? How did you do those cold emails? What did you send it with? And you realize that, for example, they were using some tool that half of the emails were landing in spam. The email was also not formulated correctly. And then you're able to formulate the problem, and they see, I've been doing it wrong. I also have not been doing any content. And the cold emails that I sent were actually quite bad. So now we have a clarity on the problem, which is at the root of the pain. And then you make them an offer to resolve the problem, right? Primarily the sales offer, the pitch will be on, hey, we will solve this problem, but then the close gets made on removing the pain. So the pitch is actually on problem removal, and the close will happen then when you say, and imagine how great it will be. You will never have this anxiety anymore because you will not even depend on referrals anymore.
I love it. It's like I can see the full circle here, but it all starts with that connection, right? And since we're starting with the hook that's emotional, how do you establish that emotional connection in a sincere way?
Very good question. I love that. I wouldn't have expected anything different from you. The real secret here is true, genuine empathy and being interested in them. You cannot fake this. If you genuinely care about your audience, genuinely care about the person who you're speaking to, you will ask the right question. But if it's too much of you're in it for yourself, you just want to make a sale, this will come across as non-genuine. I'm sure you've seen this. Your experience is when people are asking you all the, what would you do with that money if you had that, right? Or any of those kind of questions where it feels a little bit fabricated, where they are kind of reading from a script. That's not good, and that comes from genuine either like lack of knowledge on how to run a good sales call, but also a bit of like a lack of care, because after all, on the other side is a human. No matter if they are running a big department in a big company, or whether they are solopreneur, they have fears and doubts. And if you explore those genuinely, and if you really care about them as a person, that is how you make the connection. Another key thing how you make a connection is also through experience. If you're able then to formulate their problem back to them correctly, and they feel understood because they know that you've seen this many times with other people, and you phrase that problem back to them, the more likely they will resonate with you, and then the more likely they will also close. So it's genuine interest plus experience, and having been there and done that many times before, that establishes the true emotional connection.
That's so good. Earlier we teased how you changed your mind on the money back guarantee. So we want to deliver on this. So I want to ask, let's preface this with why this matters. Your service is not necessarily cheap, right? But it comes with a lot of value. Some of your clients have said they've gotten 300% ROI within a few months of using it. People have said the first time that they used your practices on a call, it seemed like it was worthwhile. So what was it that helped you change your mind about the money back guarantee that you offer with Alpha Lead Academy?
It's very, very prosaic. I just tried it. It worked better, so I kept using it. We just converted much more with that, right? It's very simple. The thing is, why would you not offer it? Because you know that when people do the work, and to this day, we haven't had a single person who's actually done the work according to our instructions and who have not had at least a 3 times ROI. We did have a few people who came in and it did not do the work. That happens, of course. But everybody who has done the work has had at least a 3 times ROI within 6 months. In one case, it was 8 months, but yeah. And so it just simply works. So why would I not offer a money back guarantee? It's as simple as that. And it helps people because, as you know, I've heard the rumor that there are people who sell something similar to what I sell. I don't know if it's true, but it could very well be. And if you have a money back guarantee, and that is genuinely like, you should even want to be offering a money back guarantee. You should be so good at what you do that a money back guarantee is a complete no-brainer, right? And so that's why we do it. It just works better.
And I've heard a dirty rumor that you accept installment payments also. Is that correct?
Yes, that is true.
The rumors are true. He is compassionate. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Michal Bohanes, and he is our guest here on Behind the Profile. But I never want to leave without asking one more personal question, right? I love the stuff that you do on LinkedIn, but you also mentioned your wife at the top of the interview. And she's an integral part of what you guys do at Alpha Lead Academy. How has she influenced you as a man, as a businessman, and how have you changed for the better because of Anna's presence in your life?
Well, the way how we met was through a business network. We were both starting our businesses there. And it was very early on in my journey and her journey as well, but she was still employed at the time. So for me, it was kind of like make or break. And I was struggling at the time. It was back in 2018. And she had such great kind of mindset reframes and was really able to call out my inner wuss very effectively, that we became really, really close. And although she was in Florida and I was in London, we really became very close at the time. And then I just said, I have to visit that girl. And then we met and got married just 6 months after that. So it was a relatively quick process. Now, how has she changed me? It's like her teachings are very influenced by, she's a Landmark alumna. I don't know how familiar you are with Landmark. It's effectively it's like a community that kind of helps you to become better at whatever it is that you do. You know, there's a little bit of an aura of a cult around it, but I think they're great. I think they're great. Generally, what I've seen from them is really good. Although they have their own like secret handshakes, you know, and you kind of recognize people by how they talk, whether they are Landmark alumnus as well. But her way of reframing a couple of things have been really instrumental for me. Like for example, one of her, and pardon my French, one of her sayings is, you have to mind yourself until you believe that you are successful. You really have to kind of put yourself through whatever it is, affirmations. I really believe that they work as long as they are powered by consistent action. If you affirm yourself that you're an athlete, and then of course you sit in front of the TV and just eat Twinkies all day, it's not going to work. But affirmations are really key, because you first have to believe before the action, before the results follow. This is effectively, anytime you start up a business, you have to believe first. And I did not have that down. And she also, one of the things that she's changed me was also my approach to religion. I was very much an atheist. I'm not anymore. She was quite an important part of that, because she, very kind of God-fearing woman. And initially I made a little bit fun of that, but gradually I saw that it's all interconnected, that faith in your abilities to build a business and to become successful has a lot to do with believing the irrational, believing the initially unbelievable. And so many ways how she's influenced me, but those would be, I think, the main ways, that the faith in something, faith in a better future must come first, and that you really genuinely have to believe it, that you can. And if you then act on that faith, if you act in congruence with the faith, good results will come. It's a law of nature.
Wow. You should write a book, Michael. Bookmark Bohanes on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, but most importantly, check him out online, alphaleadacademy.com. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Michal Bohanes. LinkedIn, he is so approachable. Hit him up in his DM, slide in there, ask him your questions. He's a human being. He will respond. And also, don't be afraid to engage. Comment on his posts. They're very insightful. If you get up at the crack of dawn like yours truly, they'll be there ready and waiting for you. Thank you so much for your time today, Michael. It's an absolute treasure having you on Behind the Profile.
Thank you, Joey. You're an amazing interviewer. I appreciate that.